Hello there. I'd like to welcome you to the initial workshop for the 3D Printing and IP Futures project. So my name is Angela Daly and I am Vice-Chancellor's Research Fellow at Queensland University of Technology in Brisbane, Australia. I'm a legal scholar of the regulation of new technologies and I will be leading this project over the next 18 months. I'm sorry I can't be with you in person today, but I've made this video to give you an introduction to the project overall, and then specifically to the legal aspects of the project. My colleague Dr. Thomas Birchnow will speak after me in more detail about the horizon scanning aspect of the project. So the 3D Printing and IP Futures project is an interdisciplinary international programme of research which will be taking place over the next 18 months. The team combines legal, business and social science expertise to examine the relationship between 3D printing and IP in a selection of developed and developing economies, and possible futures for this relationship both globally and locally. The research aims to address the issue of how 3D printing's deployment into societies at large is currently unfolding, and also looking to possible future scenarios for the technology's implementation. We will have a particular focus on how 3D printing is interacting and may interact in the future with existing IP laws, their conceptual bases, and the enforcement of these laws internationally, regionally, and locally. Alongside traditional legal analyses of 3D printing's impact on IP, we will also employ a highly innovative foresight approach, which my colleague Thomas will explain more about just after me. We in the team will draw on our track record on 3D printing as a topic of legal and socio-economic inquiry to examine the direction of growth in 3D printing technologies across different countries. We will also look at how each IP right, so copyright, patents, trademarks and design rights, apply to 3D printing processes, 3D printer files, and the final printed products. We will engage with how the current and future potential implementations of 3D printing may challenge existing IP laws and the assumptions behind them. The project is split into 4 different stages of research. The first stage of the project is to conduct a literature review of work already published on 3D printing and IP in different disciplines. In particular, we will be looking at the current and speculated future for 3D printing, the interaction between 3D printing's current trajectory and IP law and practice, any differences which are already visible between how different jurisdictions and their IP laws are encountering 3D printing, and the extent to which different industries and sectors and their associated use of IP protections are experiencing different challenges and opportunities as a result of 3D printing's development and deployment. The second stage of the project will be the horizon scanning part, which, as I've mentioned, Thomas will talk in greater detail about next. The third stage of the project, which I will also talk in more detail about just before, will examine how IP laws, both in the UK and in a selection of other jurisdictions, are encountering 3D printing's current developments and projected futures. This stage will also address the issue of how 3D printing is impacting and may impact on the infringement and enforcement of IP laws nationally and internationally. The fourth and final stage of the project will draw upon the research conducted in the initial 3 stages in order to produce policy observations and recommendations and identify avenues for further and continuing research regarding the interaction of IP and 3D printing. So I'm going to be in charge of the legal research component of the project, and I'll talk now a little bit more about what that will involve. But firstly, I want to introduce you a bit more to my own work. So I am a UK and EU trained legal academic, and I have experience in carrying out and designing legal and socio-legal research in the EU, UK, Australia and North America. Specifically on 3D printing, I have been working on legal aspects of 3D printing since 2013. In fact, last year I published a book based on this work on 3D printing and the law called Socio-Legal Aspects of the 3D Printing Revolution, which was published by Palgrave Macmillan, which includes chapters on intellectual property in 3D printing, along with other work looking at firearms, product liability, and also privacy and data aspects of 3D printing. The research in this project will build on the existing body of work on 3D printing and IP, including my own. We intend to extend this existing work by employing a transnational approach to examine the interaction of 3D printing and IP in a local, regional and international sense. In order to conduct this research, I'll be using traditional legal methods as well as some empirical methods, and also take a comparative transnational approach to 3D printing and IP in the different jurisdictions that we will be considering, which are the UK, the EU, Australia, the US, India, China and Russia. So a mixture of developed economies and developing economies. From my own existing work, I think there are three areas within IP law which are emerging as ripe for further inquiry with regards to 3D printing that we will be looking at in this part of the research. So firstly, the subject matter of IP protection, and this is really important given uncertainties around the application of certain IP rights to CAD files and the end products produced by 3D printing. Another area is exceptions to IP infringement, and the third area are regimes around intermediary or secondary liability. So it seems at the moment, despite attempts at international harmonisation, these areas face varying standards across jurisdictions, and it seems to be there are certain reasons for this. So aside from a kind of lack of international harmonisation, there's also a lack of internal harmonisation across different areas of IP, which of course predates 3D printing, but arguably has been brought to the fore with the development of 3D printing. And in particular, we can see that copyright has gone through certain reforms as a result of the internet and processes of digitization, but other areas of IP have not gone through the same process, particularly patents. But potentially now this is proving problematic with the advent of 3D printing and the digitization of objects as well as files and immaterial subjects. So another area we're going to look at as well in this research, the legal part, is the notion of authorship in IP, and this is particularly the case in light of the co-creation phenomenon associated with 3D printing. And the final area we will look at as well are questions around the effective enforcement of IP laws in a scenario with 3D printing, which may entail much more decentralization of production and distribution than previously has been seen for physical objects. So, as I said, we'll be examining all these topics in the course of the research project, but the legal research component as well will involve assessing the impact that the future scenarios projected in the horizon scanning work may have on the application and enforcement of IP rights globally, regionally and locally. And we will include an analysis of whether there is divergence on this point across the different IP rights in different jurisdictions, and also suggest possible legal and policy reforms for each potential future scenario. So that's what we plan to do in this part of the work overall, and also in the legal aspect. So thank you very much for listening, and I'm happy to receive your questions and comments on this planned work. Thank you.